Jesus is very personal in that text. He doesn't say, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting Christians? He says, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And it's meant to hit us in our spirits, to convict us a little bit. Because when we persecute the world, when we persecute the children of God, we don't just do so to those individuals, to those groups of people. We do so to God. To understand a God that takes things personal. And that psalm in Psalm 30. To God that is taking things personal. A God that would willingly turn his face away from us. And that's what the psalmist is pleading. God, please don't turn your face away from me. A God that would take things personal. And I wonder, as I sat back and watched all of these Easter services over this past couple weeks. And every church does it a little bit different, but the pomp and circumstance is there for Easter. Many churches do these big, elaborate productions and these plays, and every year it gets more massive. And the music gets more worldly. And the church begins to look like a concert or a Broadway play, and no longer like a praise. We do all this praising and galloping around and proclaiming the goodness of God, and then we go right back to our house and do the same things that we were doing before. We talk down to each other in the same way that we always did. We commit the same acts of sin over and over again. Our lives look exactly the same. And we came here and we proclaimed the resurrection of Jesus on that cross. That we might be free and we might be saved from all of this. And then we go right back to our lives. And so Jesus meets Saul on the road. And he says, Saul, why do you persecute me? And I have to ask if we don't encounter Jesus in that same way. A Jesus that in this instance is 100% pointing the finger. Will you be in a spirit of prayer with me? Oh, giving and gracious God, we thank you so much that you might serve as a living witness to our lives, a willing and living witness to the sacrifice that is necessary for us to live lives of substance, for us to be bathed in the grace and the love of you, that we might stand for hope and truth, that we might be willing to evolve beyond our comfort, that we might really be willing to grow in our faith and grow in our grace from one degree of glory to the next. God, I ask that you be in the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts, that we might be hope and love, and that we might be courageous enough to shine your light even in the darkest corners of this world. The people of God proclaim together. So the question today is, where does God dwell? That's a beautiful word that you read all through the Psalms, but it's not a word that we use anymore. Nobody invites someone over to their house and says, welcome to my dwelling. We don't do that anymore. But where does God dwell? I want you to raise your hand if you think you know the answer to that question. Got one there, we got a couple. Okay, good. So hold on to that thought, okay? So as I'm sitting here in the afterglow of Easter, I think I'm left with the question that all of us Christians are left with. What's next, right? We just had the big party. What's next? What do we do? And we find ourselves in the season of Eastertide, and frankly, that's a little bit boring of a season, right? It's like, okay, but that guy Jesus, right? I don't really want to talk about anybody else. I don't really want to listen to anyone else's sermons. I want to talk about Jesus. But at this point, we start to embrace a Jesus that's no longer with us. And in the shadow of that love, that sacrifice, in the shadow of that resurrection, we rejoice in love. And we begin to start the process to ponder what we do with it all. What do we do with that sacrifice? And in those places, I hope and I pray that we lean towards wisdom. And that we not lean towards the wisdom of the world or the wisdom of Facebook or whatever voice that we choose to look towards, but we lean towards the wisdom of God. And where do we find the wisdom of God? This thing right here. Now, for some of you, it might not be familiar, but for others of you, this is the Holy Bible. There's lots of words in here. There's wonderful things in here. And there's a thing in this book called wisdom literature. Now, there's a book called Proverbs, which we credit to King Solomon. And there's another two books. One is Ecclesiastes, and the other one is Job. Are you familiar with those three? Yes? No? Maybe? Yes. Good. Very good. Okay. We're rolling today. And so wisdom literature is defined as literature that reveals the collected wisdom of generations of godly people and invites us to consider the complexity and simplicity of living wisely. Now, that's a lot of words. But these verses from these texts, from Proverbs, from Ecclesiastes, and from Job, are what we see all around us. So when you go in somebody's house and you see a verse that's on their wall, a lot of times it's a verse from Proverbs, right? They're on plaques and buildings. They're the tattoos that people get, right? This wisdom literature. And we reference these things all through scriptural works. And these books, they lay out this foundation, this definition of what it means to be wise. And on the surface, it seems to be a simple concept, right? But for all of us that have gone down this journey of trying to gain wisdom, is it simple? Not so much. The truth is, simple isn't always so simple. And so here's what we find in Proverbs. Doesn't wisdom cry out, and understanding shout? Atop the heights along the path, at the crossroad, she takes her stand. By the gate before the city, at the entrance, she shouts, I cry out to you people. My voice goes out to all of humanity. Understand skill, you who are naive. Take this to heart, you fools. Listen, for I speak things that are correct. From my lips comes what is right. My mouth utters the truth. My lips despise wickedness. All the words of my mouth are righteous. Nothing in them is twisted or crooked. All of them are straightforward for those who understand, and upright for the knowledgeable. Take my instruction rather than silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. Wisdom is better than pearls. Nothing is more delightful than she. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence. I have found knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, the path of evil and corrupt speech. I have advice and ability as well as understanding and strength. By me, kings rule and princes issue righteous decrees. By me, rulers govern and officials judge righteously. I love those who love me. Those who seek me will find me. Riches and honor are with me, as well as enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold. My crops are better than choice silver, and I walk in the way of righteousness on the paths of justice to provide for those who love me and to fill up their treasuries. The Lord created me at the beginning of his way before deeds long in the past. I was formed in ancient times, at the beginning, before earth was. When there were no watery depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs flowing with water. Before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before God made the earth and the fields, or the first day of the dry land. I was there when he established the heavens, when he marked out the horizon for the deep sea, when he thickened the clouds above, when he secured the foundations of the deep, when he set a limit for the sea, so water couldn't go beyond his command. When he marked out the earth's foundations, I was beside him as a master of crafts. I was having fun, smiling before him all the time, frolicking in his uninhabited land and delighting in the human race. Now, children, listen to me. Happy are those who keep to my ways. Listen to instruction and be wise. Don't avoid it. Happy are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorpost. Those who find me find life. They gain favor from the Lord. Those who offend me injure themselves. All those who hate me love death. And here we find what the Common English Bible describes as wisdom's autobiography. That's the title of this section. I think it's apt. And here we find wisdom that writes and ultimately pleads for the reader, which is all of us, that we might lean into wisdom, that we might take her hand and allow her to lead us down the path. And it's a prudent and a straightforward call in many ways, but simple isn't always simple, is it? What is wisdom? At its core, above all things, does it solely require experience alone, or is it bound to something deeper, something more ingrained into the heart of us? Have you ever met a really, really wise young person? When I think about wisdom, I can't help but think about the quiet places, those places where we encounter stillness. And that stillness, for many of us, dwells on the periphery of our lives, right? It's not here. That calm and alarming quiet that we so desperately avoid, we run from. So much so that we can't even sleep in it, right? We got to have some type of noise, a TV in the background, a radio going, a sound machine, a fan. As though silence itself might carve out a place in the franticness of our minds. And it's in that place, outside the scope of desire, that we find wisdom, outside of the noise and the cadence of everyday life. And that's the place where this wisdom evolves, flowers, and ultimately blooms. And the wisest of us tend to be the people that aren't talking. The ones that seem to have this perfect timing, right? They're always just waiting patiently for just the right time to offer up that perfect advice, that perfect suggestion that just hits us in the right moment, in the right frame of mind. They're the ones that listen actively, the ones that fully embrace every word that we offer. And they're the people that seem to have this knack for presenting these complex ideas in the simplest of terms. The ones that seem to just be a master of duh. They say it and it's perfect. And they're the ones that have the calmest hearts. Those are the wise ones. And the wisdom they carry, it doesn't just come from the walk that they've walked in life. Surely experience matters, but it's transcendent. There's something more, something in their very being. And wisdom writes, I love those who love me. Those who seek me will find me. And those are simple instructions, right? Incredibly simple, to the point. So what separates us from the wisest among us? Well, my friends, it's space. Purely, simply space. It's all summed down. We don't have the space for wisdom to develop, to stretch out her legs, and to grow. My favorite part of the morning time is when my little kiddos wake up. And Ember, in her growing state, she opens her eyes and she begins to stretch. And guess what? She's got room to stretch. She's got her own huge space carved out in the middle of the king bed as I sleep on the little corner over here. And she can stretch. Room to grow where planted. And because we don't have that room, because we don't have that space to stretch out and grow, we don't have the space for God to dwell, for God to create within us this deeper, more significant bond, this something more. You see, God and wisdom are tied at the hip. The Lord created me in the beginning of his way, before his deeds long in the past. I was formed in the ancient times, at the beginning, before the earth was. When there were no watery depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs flowing with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before God made the earth and the fields and the first day of the dry land, I was there. When he established the very heavens, when he marked out the horizon on the deep sea, when he thickened the clouds above, when he secured the fountains of the deep, when he set a limit for the sea so that water couldn't go beyond his command. When he marked out the earth's foundations, I was beside him as the master of crafts. I was having fun, smiling before him all the time, frolicking in his inhabited earth and delighting in the human race. You see, wisdom shared in the creation of man and the creation of life. And as a result, wisdom is an extension of God. And God grants wisdom to the most beloved of us. God gave wisdom to King Solomon that he might be the most powerful and the most proficient king of all. And he carried it as the wisest man ever, the man who wrote this very Proverbs text. And he carried it with him almost his entire life until he decided that his desires were more important than God. And guess what happened at that point? God took his wisdom back. And Solomon fell. It's a beautiful thing, this wisdom. I was beside him. As a master of crafts, I was having fun, smiling before him all the time, frolicking in his inhabited earth and delighting, yes, delighting in the human race. It's a beautiful phrase, delighting in the human race, in, not with. In, not with, in each of us, in every single one of us. And that is unequivocal. That, my friends, is undeniable. Wisdom dwells within. So why do we struggle? Why do we struggle so hard? Why do we limp through this life running into wall after wall after wall, repeating the same habits over and over again, things that we know better than doing? Why do we seem incapable of living wisely? Ask yourself, why do we make the same mistakes over and over again? And then end up right back where we started, and we look around and we say, well, how did I get here? Space. To be distant from God is an audacious and arduous place to be, but how might we find God with the clutter that seems to stand in the way? Where is there room for God in the franticness of our schedules, amid the chaos of our lives? We rolled through Lent and got to Easter, and everybody took a deep breath and said, I think I can take a couple of Sundays off and just hang out. And you see the pews, here we are. We started thinking about summer. If I loop in Sunday to my vacation, then I have an extra 2. We start to do math. We start to do this thing where we say, oh, I have this individual relationship with God, so maybe I don't need community as much as I needed to. I had so much growth in community that maybe I can go continue that growth over here by myself and have my own private little Bible study in my house. Maybe turn on YouTube and sing a couple songs, and praise is done, we're good. Back to the pool. And all the while, still haven't created space for God to dwell. Put God on the back burner over here and still have the audacity to expect God's wisdom to flow into our lives. Even though we parked God over there in the corner and said, don't move, you stay there. I'll be back, I promise. Just watch the iPad. Doesn't work like that. Where we put our energy determines what's important in our lives. And we naturally have places that we have to put it, right? We have to put it in work. We have to put it into our family. We have to put it into our friends. And they're tremendously important. They drive our lives. But if God is to be the foundation of our lives, shouldn't we commit? Are we committed to our health? Are we committed to our development and our growth, to our future, to our faith? Are we committed to these conveniences in life, these distractions? I've got to get home because the news starts at 5. I'm all out of space on my TiVo, so I need to make sure that I'm sitting there when 911 comes on the TV. Can you carve out space in your life? And maybe that means sacrifice. Maybe that means that right now you need to come up here and nail yourself to that cross. I'm not suggesting it. But maybe that means a smaller sacrifice. Can you carve out space to grow? And if you can find the space to stretch out and expand your vision, to expand the call of God on your life, then wisdom will flow. I have advice and ability, as well as understanding and strength. By me, kings rule, and princes issue righteous decrees. By me, rulers govern, and officials judge righteously. I love those who love me. Those who seek me will find me. Riches and honor are with me, as well as enduring wealth and righteousness. The thing about wisdom literature is that it's undeniable. The proof is in the pudding, right? This is advice and wisdom that's passed down from generations to generations to generations, and all those things that those generations passed down, the stuff that really stuck. Well, it stuck for a reason, didn't it? It works. And we get to decide. We have the power to choose to decide whether to follow the simple instructions or not. And that's the beauty of having something right in front of your face that's written out. Now, children, listen to me. Happy are those who keep my ways. Listen to instruction and be wise. Don't avoid it. Happy are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doorpost. Those who find me find life. They gain favor from the Lord. But those who offend me, well, they injure themselves. All those who hate me, well, they love death. It's simple. And we understand the point of this wisdom literature. We understand its significance. And we understand this call to follow. And thus we're invited to consider both the duality of the complexity and the simplicity of living wisely. But you're again left with the question, what is God actually saying to you? What we offer to the world must, my friends, it must matter. How we carry ourselves in this life is a reflection of our relationship with God. So what we speak into the world must be of substance. Our mistake is that we water down everything. We water down this offering that we bring to the world by adding to the clutter just more nonsense, more words, when in fact we're called to listen. To listen first and then respond. Not listen while waiting to offer up what we've been thinking about. Not preparing our statement for when it's our turn to talk. But listen. To respond to the cries of the world and ultimately to respond to the call of God in our lives. But how can we hear that call if we don't have space to breathe? If we never take a day off? If we never go on a walk out in nature? If we never find ourselves by a body of water on a random afternoon? How do we find space to hear the call of God? The truth is, you know it as well as I do, life doesn't stop. Life just keeps lifing. And the world won't slow itself down for anybody. And so it's up to each and every one of us to slow ourselves down, to find a cadence in this life that still invites space for breath that still invites space for God to dwell in those quiet corners, to choose what's most important in our lives by our effort and our energy, by what we ultimately commit to it, and by the time, yes, the time that we create for it, that we might seek wisdom around every corner, that we might reach for hope instead of despair, peace instead of chaos, and love instead of doubt. And above all, the answer to the question that we began with, where does God dwell? In us, not with us. So have you found the space to listen to the call of God in your life? Paul writes in Ephesians, I pray that the eyes of your heart will have enough light to see what is the hope of God's call, what is the richness of God's glorious inheritance among believers, and what is the overwhelming greatness of God's power that is working among us believers. Thanks be to God.
These are your thoughts, dictator. This is the hope of God set free. These are your thoughts.